do to get ready for what we're fixing to do. I'm just praying that God will do something great with that trip to the laundromat. We can do some real cleaning, some real washing and rinsing there. I like those opportunities. I enjoy getting in the middle of people that have needs or are just completely maybe lost. I don't know. But I enjoy that. That's what the church is supposed to be doing. This is just, what we're doing here really is just a small portion of what really is our kingdom business. So I wanted to look at some things that I believe will encourage us, and start in John chapter 10. And I'm going to start at verse 1. Go through about 9 verses there and just see where it takes us. What it says there in the first verse says, "Truly, truly, I say to you, he who does not enter by the door into the fold of the sheep, but climbs up some other way, he is a thief and a robber. But he who enters by the door is the shepherd of the sheep, and to him the doorkeeper opens, and the sheep hear his voice, and he calls his own sheep by name and leads them out." You notice that personal touch. He doesn't just gather up a group and move them out. He calls each of them by name and moves them out. And then it says, when he puts forth all of his own, he goes ahead of them, and the sheep follow him because they know his voice. The stranger they simply will not follow, but will flee from him because they do not know the voice of strangers. This figure of speech Jesus spoke to them, but they did not understand what those things were which he had been saying. So Jesus said to them again, "Truly, truly, I say to you, I am the door of the sheep. All who came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep did not hear them. I am the door. If anyone enters through me, he will be saved and will go in and out." This is very important. He will go in and he will go out and find pasture. We have way too many. This is what the first thing I really heard the Lord say to me was, we have way too many who go out, but they never went in. They grab a hold of those instructions. They jump right to the go out. But what he said was, he said they will go in and they will go out and they'll find pasture. So the first couple of things, there's a lot of things out of this I want to pull, and I'll just jump right to it. The call of sheep is not some sort of haphazard occasion. It's a product of intimate interaction, and that's crucial. As you hang out with sheep as a result of coming through one thing, you come through the person of Christ. Notice he said, "I am the door." You have to come through me. That means you come through his suffering. You come through his sacrifice and his betrayal, and yes, of his great benefits. We always like to jump to the benefits. But there's other things. There is suffering, and there's sacrifice, and in his case, and sometimes in our case, we deal with betrayal. But we come by way of passing through his heart. And by the time we pass through that door, we start knowing who our shepherd really is. And so we can pass on not just information about him, but we can give him away freely because he's ready. He stands at the door of every heart, and he's ready to move. Surely, and this is one thing I think people get nervous about when they go and they share their faith, is they feel like somebody's going to ask them a question that they don't know the answer to. You ever have somebody do that? Just throw just an outright curveball at you, like, what do I do with that? And my suggestion is do absolutely nothing with a curveball. If they're throwing you a curve, don't swing the bat. I mean, you divert a conversation to what you know. And by know, I don't mean, you'll see as I go further what I really mean by that. Go with what you know to be true. Stay away from stuff that's just there for controversy. We've got enough controversy. We don't need help for that. There's a lot of that out there. Just leave that alone. There's nothing wrong with saying I don't know anything about that. That's not my thing. What I'm here to share is what I know and what I've been through. we have in our flesh plenty of other voices, and so when he says all these things about, the sheep will not listen to the voice of a stranger, he's really dividing. And I say this a lot, and I realize that you just have to get used to that. He's dividing the fact that you have a flesh and you're born again spirit. There's that divide again. That the spirit never hears the voice of a stranger, never listens to it, just presses right on into what God's saying. And here's what God's saying, more importantly. So I want to be clear that I know we have other voices. I hear other voices regularly. The thing is, because I have the Spirit of God in me, I have the ability to tell that voice to hush. Before I did not. When I was lost, when I heard a voice, I just followed it. You did too. You just did. You just went with the flow. Matter of fact, you didn't think you were hearing anybody suggest anything to you. The flesh and Satan taken together are so crafty at making you believe that whatever you think is your own doing anyway, that you don't even pay attention to the fact that you're following impulses. The Bible says that we have impulses of the flesh in us that beat all the time. Those are thoughts and things that just come hammering at us. And they're given to us, and then we have to decide what to do. Not all of that is just you coming up with it. But the deal is, it's an impulse. It's not a reality. It's not a fact. It has no authority over your life. It's just an impulse. But unless you've been touched by the grace and blood of Jesus, you may not know that. So that's one of the great blessings we have that we can give away, is that you don't have to stay under the authority of your stupid impulses. But let's notice some other things, what he does with the sheep here. He leads them out, and notice it says he leads all of them out. He never leaves any of his children to the side when he's doing his business. He leads all of them out, and then he goes before them. Now you realize he doesn't let you sit comfortably. I mean, one of the first things Jesus does with a flock of sheep is sends them out. He doesn't just pet them. He doesn't create a divine petting zoo where he just throws them some peanuts now and then and say, isn't this fun? It's not what he does. He sends all of them out. And he goes before them, more importantly, so that they find pasture. And what he means by pasture is this. Pasture is feeding ground. It's a place for strengthening. It's a place for security. And we've all been raised around farms around here, so we know about pastures. There's something else that goes on in a pasture when they go to doing all that eating and having fun and just getting strong and feel all safe and secure. What else goes on in a pasture? You guys had cows, you've been around cows. Here's what I know. They reproduce. There are going to be some more cows eventually. You leave them alone out there, that's what they do. When you put a herd in a good pasture, you don't have to worry about whether or not there's going to be more. There will be more. That's what sheep do when they get into pasture, is they reproduce. So that's our job. Is we should see that as part of what we do, is we reproduce. But we often fail to do is to use the right tools when seeking to bring others into this fold of ours. We like to use our answers like sledgehammers instead of bread. We convict rather than convince. The Holy Spirit is the one who should do the convicting, because he can do it in a manner that leads to repentance and brings hope. And so I believe we can bring conviction if we first of all heard the voice of the Lord inside of us. For each individual person, I've heard people and I've seen these little seminars, and I'm not necessarily against them if they work for you. But I've seen those where they have it all lined out when you go out to share your faith with others, that you say this and this and this and this, and then do this. I just never could do that. Every time I ever tried that, I stumbled more over myself than I could ever imagine. Because to me, at least for me, and I'm just speaking for me, but when I have seen those things, all I see is program. And that sort of isolates you away from the Spirit of God to do what he's doing. Each individual is different. I mean, truthfully, let's say I was going to share with, I'm going to share with Candy on some particular day. She may have a different need one day than she does the next. So just because I got this plan, what I'm going to say to her, it may be great one day, but then maybe another day I might as well be, throwing spitballs at the wall. It doesn't affect her, because we're all in different places on any given day of our life, so we must be dependent on the Lord to tell us what we're doing. And so we need to be careful that our answers and our discussion is not about conviction, but it's about bringing bread, give them something to eat. We need to leave that conviction to Him. He knows what He's doing. And what we also need to remember is that lost people, especially lost people, and even Christian people who are in a stressful part of their life, they tend to already feel condemned. When you get to them, they don't need any help with that. They're already there. So we don't need to help them with that. They need to see something. They need to taste something that leads them to water. And they want to know that broken hearts can actually be healed. That hard hearts can be changed. And that God will show up for them no matter where they are. Whether they're rebellious, whether they're full of themselves, whether they're confused and doubt whether He's even there. He can show up in any situation. He's bigger than all of our situations put together. But they need to be able to see that. They don't need to just hear that. Oh, I'm making sense to you? That they need to see what's in you. Here's some proof of that. I want to show this is just beautiful. John chapter 20, verse 24. Give me a second to get there. And it says, but Thomas, you all know about Thomas. A lot of people call him Doubting Thomas. But Thomas, one of the 12, called Didymus, was not with them when Jesus came. So the other disciples were saying to him, hey, we have seen the Lord. But he said to them, hey, unless I see in his hands the imprint of the nails, and I put my finger into the place of the nails, and put my hand into his side, I will not believe. And after 8 days, his disciples were again inside, and Thomas was with them. And Jesus came, and the doors having been shut, by the way, they were shut because the disciples were scared to death, and they had locked themselves in because they were afraid they were going to be attacked. And so they locked themselves in. So I'm not sure if Thomas was the only person doubting their security in the Lord. It seems like to me maybe the whole crew had some of that. So the doors are locked, and Jesus came. As I said, the doors haven't been shut, and he just, in other words, he walks through the door and stood in their midst and said, hey, peace be with you. Then he said to Thomas, because, Jesus hears what we're thinking. He said, Thomas, reach here with your finger and see my hands, and reach here in your hand and put it into my side. And do not be unbelieving, but believing. And Thomas answered and said to him, my Lord, my God. I think it did the job for Thomas. Did you notice even in the conviction about Thomas's unbelief, how the Lord just said, hey, you can stop with the unbelief. Just go back to believing. See how gentle that was? There was no, let me just tell you how bad you are, how bad it is to be unbelieving, you jerk. He doesn't do that. He just goes at him very gently and says, you can stop that now. You can move on. You can just move on. I find it really interesting that this is what Thomas asked for. He didn't ask for another sign or a miracle or to see some great, display. Thomas's exact request is this. He wants to see evidence of wounds that have been healed. That's what he's after. I want to see wounds. That's why he says, I want to see those hands. I want to see his side. I want to see that because I want to see evidence of wounds that have been healed. Because you see, I think that's what everybody's looking for. When the lost see that sheep have entered into a fold wounded, just as they are, except that the wounds are now gone, with nothing left but the evidence of healing scars left behind. That's what draws them. That's what drew me to a shepherd. It's the hope that they see in your scars that will cause them to seek a shepherd in the first place. We really don't have room for a gospel or for sharing a gospel that's free of scars. No one can relate to that. certainly can't. Many will not share their scars because they may still be dealing with more current wounds than they are with real scars of healing. And when you get in it, by the way, you can be in that situation at any time in your life. It doesn't disqualify you from sharing. What you do is you do not allow yourself to get pushed into an area where you're still in the process of healing. I mean, where you're wounded. Say you've just been through a divorce or something, and somebody presses you into that area. That's not a place. It doesn't mean you can't share the Lord because you're going through a trial. It does mean you probably don't need to go into that, because that's not an area you're ready to deal with. And I'll explain that a little further in just a second. But you're still free to discuss areas where you're in the right spot, where God's dealing with you in a healthy way, and you have freedom in those areas. Those are areas you're game for. So stay in those areas and stay away from the others. I thought about the gentleman that the young boys ran across a couple of weeks ago, as soon as they heard church, that he turned into a sour lemon and went ballistic on them and used all sorts of colorful descriptions of the church, none of which I can repeat on film. I thought, man, that wasn't fair for them, because they haven't been through anything that could return for that. And it was really unfortunate for them. But I would have loved that. That would have been like cheesecake for me, because my first response would have been, instead of, he probably thought I'd come back hard, I'd say, oh man, I understand you. I get you. I know that there's lots of parts in the church that just stink of raw buzzard eggs. There's things that are just wrong. And people in church can hurt you as bad as people in uptown. In fact, people in church can hurt you worse than people uptown, because they pretend that they would never do that, and then when you're not looking, they do. So, it's important to be able to relate to that guy and say, hey, Jesus loves a faulty church. He loves people that screw up. And so he can love you too. Just because church people hurt you just means they weren't following the shepherd very well on that particular day. They were having an off day, or month, or whatever. But you can relate to those people. Just keep bringing them in. In other words, whatever they throw at you, go with them, because there's some truth in what they're saying. Even when they say something ridiculous to you, always look and listen for truth that's coming out of their mouth, because there may be some truth. Maybe it won't even be true for where they're spewing, but there'll be something true about their heart that's being revealed to you while they're talking. If you just listen, there's always a door into somebody when they're talking. So you just listen. Just be careful to listen. So now here's what I thought about this a lot about that example, and what came to me, of course, was in my own experience. I could talk all day to you about the breaking of my femur about 6 years ago, and if I was wearing shorts, I could show you the scar. Not wearing shorts, and I therefore cannot show you the scar. But I can tell you too how blessed I am to have that scar, because I remember. Here's why. I remember what it felt like 6 years ago when it happened. But I couldn't talk about it then, could I? I couldn't talk. I could scream. I could yell. But I really couldn't talk very well. Yeah, you enjoy that. I mean, I was lifting the roof 6 years ago when that femur was split in half. I could do some yelling. But had you asked me to be reasonable and to share the hope of the gospel that I have in the midst of my pain, I couldn't do it. There was no way I could do it. The pain was too great, and the recovery was far too long, as I learned later. For the moment, there was nothing good to talk about. But now, I can look at that scar, and I can smile when I look at that scar. Because what I see now is I see faithful written all over that scar. And I can honestly encourage anybody who goes through something like that, because I've had that experience, and I lived through it, and I've got the scars to prove it. Here's what I'm saying to you guys. You see, that's what people are looking for. So when you look in the mirror and say, well, what have I got? What have I got to offer somebody that needs the Lord? And so I want to tell you, the first thing you look for to give away is your scars. Where is the evidence of your scars? Because that's what you have to minister from. Areas where you have been wounded and you have been healed. Where there is proof that you went through something. And God was faithful to you. And God continues to be faithful to you. The problem with the church is, a lot of the church, not all of it, is they don't like to talk about scars. They don't like to discuss when they go and share Jesus that they've had problems. They've had addictions. They've had hang-ups that almost destroyed them. They don't like to acknowledge that because that, in their eyes, that makes the Lord look weak. But it is strange that when the Lord wanted his real strength to be shown to Thomas and to be shown to the folks on the road to Emmaus, what did he do? He broke bread to the fellows on the road to Emmaus. And by the way, in the Jewish custom, the way they break bread, we just tear it off and hand it out, and that's how we do it. But in the Jewish custom, when they break bread, they do it like this. They snap it like that. And when Jesus would have done that, he would have snapped the bread and he would have exposed his palms. Mm-hmm. So what would he be showing them? Scars. First thing they saw on the road to Emmaus at that dinner table was when he broke bread to give out to them, and he showed them scars. He didn't have to say a word. All he had to do was break bread and move those hands down, and they could see evidence of who he was. See, his evidence in the long run wasn't just his miracles. His greatest evidence of I'm who I say I am is I have scars, and they're healed. They demonstrate that I went all the way to death for you, but I have come back. Not only have I come back to life, I didn't come back wounded. I didn't come back half lit and half out. I came back fully whole. But my scars remain, so I can relate to you. I can reach out to you because I have scars too. See, scars aren't bad. Wounds are bad. Bleeding, gushing wounds, they need immediate attention. That's bad. Scars are amazingly wonderful because scars proclaim something that people desperately need to know, is that wounds are okay. Wounded people are the people who need to be in the sheepfold in the first place. Jesus said, I didn't come for well people. He flatly said that. If you think you're all well and good, you don't need me. I didn't come for you. He literally said, I did not come for you. I came for people who need a physician, for sick, for people who are broken and busted and messed up. So that really needs to be honey for us bees in here. That's what we're looking for. We're looking for people who know they're messed up and broken. They may not know they need Jesus yet, but they do know they're broken. I'm not looking for somebody who's got it all together. And the reason for that really is because they're under deception and they're not ready. I mean, unless the Holy Spirit's dealt with them about where they are, they're not ready anyway. Anybody who sits back and says, dude, I like it just like I got it, then they don't know what they've got. Because without the Lord, they don't have anything. But if they haven't realized that yet, what am I going to do? Nothing. Nothing. Because the Lord is who prepares hearts. But I guarantee you, in that laundromat or wherever else we go, there'll be somebody out there ready. Somebody will be prepared. If we are prepared to show them a scar, they'll be ready to reach out to a healer. But they got to first know we got a scar. So I want you to think this morning, where are my scars? And what is it that I have been through that will help lead somebody else to the same source of safety that I found? Because, I can tell you, that's what worked for me. When I saw the urgency in a man's face as he told me about Jesus as a young man, when I saw he really saw the need for a relationship with God that went way beyond just going to church and doing the thing and going to sleep, trying to stay awake and thinking about chicken legs and whatever else that comes flying through your mind while you sit there. You know, when I found somebody who got up in my face and said, look, this is important. And then he told me why it was important to him. And then when I started hearing stories of people who've been torn up and wounded and destroyed and put back together, that's what got my attention. Because see, when I grew up in church, I grew up with addictions. And then nobody tell me that I wasn't supposed to. Nobody bothered to tell me that you're going to get hooked on stuff if you don't watch it. Nobody bothered to tell me that in church, because all I heard was a cleaned up version of the gospel. It was just cleaned up. It was just A, B, and C equals D. You got it. That's it. Boom, boom, boom. And nowhere in between the pages of the perfect gospel was there any room for my scars. So here's what I did. I just hid them. Because they weren't scars, they were wounds. And they weren't healing. But since nobody ever talked to me about wounded sheep, I assumed there wasn't any. So that if I was wounded, there was something wrong with me. Because I was bleeding. And nobody else seemed to be bleeding. Now the reason I didn't think they seemed to be bleeding is because they never talked about bleeding. Never discussed it. It was always just perfect. Ozzie and Harriet. Well, I wasn't Ozzie, and I sure wasn't Harriet. So I didn't fit. So I stayed in church, miraculously I stayed in church, but I didn't heal. For 23 years, I was born and raised in church. It took me till I was 23 years old for somebody to come to me who had been broken, who saw that I was broken, had the courage to tell me I was broken to my face, and said, hey dude, don't you want to be well? You know what I said to that? You better believe I do. If you get me, if you can see through my facade and see that I'm not what I say I am, if you can do that, yeah, I'm on that train. I'll ride that train to glory. And I did. And my wounds quit bleeding. They got slapped around and punctured some more through the years. But there's a difference between having a healed wound, a scar, being reopened and it bleeding and oozing a little bit, and you go back and fix that. Because once you've had a healing in a wound, it can come back and hit you again. I don't want to lie to you and say, just as soon as you get totally healed up, you'll never have another problem. That's a lie from hell. But I will tell you this, that once the wound's been healed, you can always go back to the doctor. You can always go back to the doctor, and he knows how to fix it again. And he can fix it in such a way that I'm not trapped by it again. It's one thing to get scratched up and beat up and need a Band-Aid, but I hadn't had to go back for surgery but once. I went for surgery one time. I've had to go back for some inoculations and some Band-Aids a bunch of times. But I have only needed surgery once. But it took somebody who else needed surgery to get me there. Are you hearing what I'm saying? You need to be real. And if you can't be real about what's weak, because look, if you're breathing, you got a weakness. Only if you're breathing. If you're not breathing, you're clear. You have no weakness. But that weakness, God leaves for you to deal with on purpose. He did it to Paul, did he not? Did not Paul say, hey, I got this thorn in my flesh, and we've made it turn into everything from 40 shades of cancer to no telling what. And the truth is, we don't know what Paul was dealing with. We have no idea. It could have been spiritual. It could have been physical. Whatever it was bad. And he wanted to get rid of it. And what did the Lord tell him? I don't think so. I'm going to leave that in place for you because you need it. You need it because somebody else is going to come up to you that's wounded. And they're going to be bleeding and gushing. And I need them to see through you that I am more than enough for your situation. That I have got you covered. I've got you taken care of. So I'm going to leave that sort of dangling in your lap. I know you'd rather I didn't. But I'm going to leave it there so people can see my strength coming to the aid of your weakness. And that's honey. That's how you draw them in. God wasn't trying to punish Paul. Good Lord. Paul laid down his life for the gospel. He wasn't being punished. He was being positioned. There's a difference between that. He's just being positioned. And so you've already been positioned. Every one of you have already been positioned for something. And some of it may bring back deep regrets, but you can turn regrets into rejoicing. You can turn that into food to set a table before the enemy. And use the very thing. Isn't it nice? Think about this now, guys. You get to use the very thing that was meant to destroy you. You get to use that on a hook to reel in people who are suffering and hurting and dying. You get to bring them into the king's chambers, sit at his table, and eat because of the very thing meant to kill you. Isn't that amazing? That our God's so big that the very thing that would have destroyed you, God just turns it on a dime, sets you free with grace and by the blood of Jesus, and say, look here. Now you got something to work with. The very thing that was your worst enemy becomes your best tool to bring people to Jesus. You just got to be brave enough to be real. That's not just my job to stand up and tell you that I was an addict, because I was hooked on some stuff. And I'm glad I was. Because if I hadn't been, I'd have been satisfied with just old church. I'd have been satisfied to sit there and sing, pray a little something, say a little something, shake a few hands, and go about my merry way. And I would have missed out on the best thing that there really is in all of this, is the fact that God's invading presence came into my life in the midst of my darkest hour. Not my good hour. Not when I was shining like the sun. God showed up when I was under my bed crying out for mercy. That's where I met Jesus. And I was already saved and going to heaven, but I was bored getting there. But I wasn't so bored that night under my bed. I was scared to death. Thought I was going to meet death. And in my weakest moment, I found out God really, really likes me like that. And if God likes me like that, imagine what he can do with me when I trust him. And I roll my wounds over into his hands. Imagine what a God that loves like that can do. But if you can't love people with that sort of vulnerability, because see, I just acknowledged I was under my bed in front of God knows how many's going to watch that. I don't care. I don't care. Some of them have probably been under their bed too. Amen. Some of them may need to be. Because God breaks us for a reason. He allows stuff to break us. God didn't break me like that. God allowed my circumstances and my stupidity to lead me to a place of breaking so that he can make me whole. So I'm not going to keep treading on the same water. I just want you to know that you need to be real with yourself. Look yourself dead in the mirror and say, God, what is it? What was broken in me that you fixed? And by the way, is there anything in there right now that's still wounded and gushing and bleeding and still just not quite right? Because us church folks bleed too. And sometimes we don't think we have the right to bleed. But I got news for you. Life goes on once we come into the kingdom. And there's some times when us good church folks bleed pretty heavily. We can gush some blood up in here. And sometimes we get ignored because that's not really there, right? I don't see any blood oozing out from under that hand. It's not there. And all we do is fool ourselves and deprive ourselves of the greatest gift we have. And that's the presence of God in the midst of a mess that makes us whole. So what you got, whatever you got, use it. If it's a heel wound, man, put it on display when it's needed. You'll know when to use it. I'm not just saying throw it out there willy-nilly. But you'll get in front of somebody who's going to need it. And God will see to that. So use what you have and be real about what you don't. Amen?
Amen.
Amen. Let's pray. Father, I love you. I thank you so much, Father, for having walked me through the desert, through the wilderness. And Lord, I thank you for whatever wilderness or desert may lie before me. You can walk me through that too. And I know that because you've already done it. And so I pray for everyone here. I pray for the lost in this community, for the struggling believer in this community that feels like no one really cares, no one's listening, no one really sees where they are. Lord, I know that you do see where they are. And I know that you are preparing to answer them. And so Lord, we thank you so much that you are faithful, God, that you align our circumstances in such a way that you can do beautiful acts of mercy and grace on us at every turn. Because you're a faithful God, and we thank you so much for being faithful to us and being faithful through us to enlarge your kingdom. In Jesus' name, amen.